Hello everyone. Let me turn down the music right now. So is the music and the sound are good together right now? Because I watched last stream and the music seemed like it was pretty loud. So hopefully it's gonna be better this time. Okay, so this live stream, I'm gonna try making a FPS game in Buildbox, and it's not that of a simple task to do. So I'm pretty sure we're gonna have some difficulty and some problems that we're gonna run into, but we'll definitely make an attempt of making an FPS game. So I'll start with that. If you guys have any input, like just write in the chat, and I'll see what you guys think of what we're gonna be doing here. Okay, so I just started a new 3D game. So let's save that right away, so that will be very wise with Buildbox. We don't want to lose all our progress at any point. Okay. Save that. Can you do how to code in Buildbox? Yeah, so the coding in Buildbox, that's still one of the live stream videos that I'm planning of doing. So as soon as I create the topics and prepare for that live stream, I'll publish when it's gonna be, and you guys can make time or watch, come back later to watch that. But the idea why I'm thinking of doing it live stream instead of just a recording is so that I can get feedback from you guys if you understand a topic, if there's still something not clear. So I'll feel like if there's anything that I'll need to go in more details to get you guys going with coding in Buildbox. So that's why I'm thinking of doing a live stream for that. And yeah, I guess I can make some tutorials, but on the side. But I'm probably gonna start with the live stream first, and then if you guys still want a tutorial, I can get some tutorials going for coding in Buildbox. Can I make a video on a 2D game kit without coding? What's a 2D game kit? Okay. There's a lot of packages that are available on Unity, and yes, I have not looked through all of them. So some of the non-code packages that are available for Unity is so Bolt, which actually Unity bought that one out, so now it's owned by Unity. And wait, let me switch my camera. I forgot to turn off the image. I wasn't doing anything, so anything much, so you guys didn't miss anything. So there's Bolt and Game Maker, I think that's what it's called, for or Playmaker. Yeah, Playmaker for for Unity, and those are both no code. So as far as I have both of them, and I'm not sure if I want to make tutorials on any of them. But Unity is also making their own no code, and it's called I think it's just visual scripting in Unity dots. So the cool thing about their visual scripting is that they're going to be using dots, like it's going to be based on dots, so the performance should be pretty high once they're done. But it's still in development, so it's not ready for production use. So I'm holding off on that. But if I'll make a tutorial, probably I'm going to go that route with the visual scripting in Unity. Okay, so is it for PC or mobile? So the FPS game, if for PC or mobile, so you can convert it. Basically, like it doesn't really matter if you're making it for the FPS for a PC or for mobile. The change are made when you're choosing which inputs you want. So for PC, you would use a mouse for looking around, and for mobile, you need to. I think you'll need to combine one of the joysticks for moving and rotating. You need multiple joysticks to if you want to make a free look around, or you can try using the touch rotate. So there's different ways you can make it for mobile, but the route that you choose is based on what you want. Okay, so let's without further delay, let's start our FPS game. So here is, okay, you guys can see it. So here is yes, this video will be uploaded. I just leave them live. It might be cropped right after I publish it, because sometimes YouTube just crops it the beginnings and ends. And please give me great idea. Okay. Okay. So I have a 3D world here, and our camera is currently positioned on the cube. So the first thing that I probably will do is a shooting mechanism. So I'll just use a okay, so let's use a cube. Let's start with a cube. Well, we had one cube. Okay. Remove. Okay, just leave this one. Make sure we set to none, and we'll just rename it so we can see what it is. Okay, so now the easy way to build out a gun would be using inside the asset itself. So for that, we'll just use a tube. Where is the tube? Oh, that's interesting. There's no tubes here. Okay, so we'll just use a cylinder for that. And I guess the way, if there's one of these assets, models that are not available in your selection. So for instance, right here, I have 3 cubes, but there's no tube. You can always go and add a tube from here, and that should make it available in the list now. So if you go and change the mesh. So you can see at the bottom there's a tube. Basically this is the list of all the meshes that you use in the game. Okay, so that's our tube right now. We'll decrease the size of our square. So that's increasing in X direction, and we'll move it back in the Z direction. So okay, we'll need to check, make sure that it's positioned correctly. So 3D world, exit that, drop it into our scene. Okay. Then we can remove this cube. So before I'll start making details on what's going on here, I would like to make sure that I have the spawning working correctly, and it's gonna be spawning in the right direction. So let's add a sphere. That's gonna be our bullet, or a snowball, whatever you want to call it. And what we'll do is on touch, so add a touch node. Just really simple right now. You can later on always replace any of these input nodes with a UI button if you're making for mobile, or you can add the ability for a key, but right now I'll just use a touch node. And on touch, to create anything, you can just use a spawn node. So on that, we'll just create a bullet in our game. Okay, and we'll select a sphere, leave it as default right now. We can always come back and change that. Sorry about that. My kids are waking up. So okay, so what are we doing now? Yeah, so create a spawner. We choose the asset that we want to spawn, and then the speed of the bullet, you can set that up in the asset itself. So inside here, you can use the move node. Now there is a issue with using a move node, and it has to do with the fact if you have follow rotation on. Actually no, it just sets it. So whenever you use move node and you are in dynamic mode, the behavior won't actually be as you expected. I guess we'll just use a move node for now and fix that later. So I'd like to use the follow rotation, so that if our gun rotates at any point, that then the bullet's gonna fly in the same direction. So let's try that out. Let's save it and click play. Okay, I'll switch it to use landscape, be easier to see. So it's landscape, preview, and we'll use 1080. Okay, so there is our spawn, and you can see that it's spawning in this direction, which is, I guess it's fine. Let's rotate. Let's rotate and see how it's gonna behave with the rotation. So if we rotate 90 degrees, let's see if our spawner is gonna spawn the correct. So looks like it's following that direction. Okay. So we'll also, for the move node, we'll also need to remove the zeros so the gravity can affect it. So 0 for X, and so nothing for X and nothing for Y. And now you can see that when the balls get spawned, just behaves very very weird. And this is what I was talking about. When you use a move node and the follow rotation is on, it's not gonna work as you expected. So let's actually turn the speed up a little bit higher, like 3. And that's still not enough. So the behavior is kind of not what we expected, and it's behaving very weirdly. So that's because of how the move node is coded. So in here, inside the update function, whatever the velocity you spawned it at, it actually continues to reset it. So if the gravity or something, or you hit something, if it stops it, or decrease, you expect it to decrease velocity, it actually won't decrease. It will continue trying to move it at 5 in the Z direction. And since we have follow rotation on, it actually rotates. It changes the direction of the velocity based on the rotation. So for our sphere, since it's rolling, you can see it starts, and then I guess the Z direction, I don't know. Let's see if we can see that in debug. So when we spawn, you can see that it rolled. Let's increase the speed to 10. Maybe I'll go further away. Well, actually, let's spawn it the other way. -5. See, it rotated, and then I guess the Z direction is pointing down, so that's why it just freezes in that one spot. So you could use, instead of a move node, you could use a set physics node. So set physics right here. So you can use this node to set a linear velocity, and this will, on enable, it'll just set it once, and it will not try to reset it to that same speed. But since we want it to follow in the rotation, so if we rotate this launcher, if we want it to be following that rotation, the set physics doesn't actually have that option, and you can add that option. But since the move node already has the follow rotation, I'll just use that. And to avoid that issue that I just showed, what you can do is actually use a delay and then disable the move node so that it wouldn't update. So how you set up that is you add a delay node. So delay node, you set it on created, and then what we want is actually a signal invert, because when the object gets created, the start node actually sends a true signal, and to disable the move node, we need to send a false signal. So when the created sends true signal, that enables the move node, and to disable the move node, we need to send a false, so we can invert that true signal, and that will make it false. And then for delay, we can specify how long does the move node, for how long the move node is on. And I think 100 milliseconds is plenty, I think. Let's save that. Okay. And now you can see that the behavior is a little bit better, but the direction is still a little bit off. And for that, I'm not even sure what's causing that, because as far as I can see, we did everything correctly. Okay, so let's set it back to, where is my move? So move, we just have it in a -5 direction. That's all correct. Now our current launcher is at 90 degrees. If we set it to 0, it should be launched straight. So it's fine with launching it straight. And now let's do a 180 rotation, so it launches toward the camera. See how that works. So that's fine. And for some reason 90 degrees, it looks like it's launching it sideways. That's interesting. So -90. What about 120? So something is off with the rotation, follow rotation, I guess. Still 45. 30. Okay, so there's something going on. As far as I know, it worked before. So there's something going on with the move rotation calculation, and as far as I've seen it before, that they use a matrix 4 to transform that, and use the quaternion rotations for that. They're quaternions. Okay, so we'll take a look at that a little bit later, I guess. So, but that is pretty weird that it does that. Okay, let me see actually if we set it to 5 and just offset for X and see if the X is calculated correctly. That way we might be able to avoid that issue by using the X direction instead of Z. Maybe there's just something miscalculated on a Z. So for that, we'll need to change the rotation. So it's always going to be launched from this side. For 0, should come out on the side. For 90, that should come out. No, there's still something wrong. Okay, never mind. So that's a known issue, I guess, for us right now, and we'll just try to avoid it, and we can fix it a little bit later. Okay, so for our sphere, set it back to a launch in the Z direction, and we'll use the negative Z direction. Okay, so there is our spawner. It's working correctly. Okay, let's see what you guys are saying here. You're seeing errors from a random 5. Alcox says there's a random 5 sends errors. Let's see what's random 5 is all about. Okay, so yeah, there's shouldn't be anything that a random 5 would be sending an error. So the only time I think that the random 5 would send an error if you use it with, I think, state machine. So there, with the state machine, there are nodes that won't work. Guess that's fine. So let me think. The setup. Basically, with a state machine, if you use some of the nodes that require in the previous initialization of the node before you can actually trigger it, it will throw errors. So whenever, and that's the problem with a state 1. So the state 1 actually gets triggered on init. And to avoid that issue, what you can do, unless you really want the state 1, whatever is in state 1, to initialize on init. And what I mean by init is basically if you go to script, and you look at these functions that are run. So init is the very first function that will be run. So anything inside init will be run first, and then the start node. And usually what start is expects every node to be initialized after start. And so if you try to manipulate some of the components in the init state, it'll actually throw errors based on which node, which component has been initialized and which hasn't been initialized. And that's the issue with the state machine. So the state machine, it emits a signal on a init, in an init state, which creates some issues with other components that require initializations of other components. So it kind of, it's a little bit complicated, but basically, yeah, try ignore not using the state 1. So the first state, try avoiding using that one, and you can use the ones that follow after that. So that's with errors, just randomly. So random doesn't do anything. So if you have random errors, I think that probably because you're using a state machine, because that's yeah, that's the errors that I've seen with state machines and that. Okay, that's a random FPS Buildbox possible. Yes, FPS is possible in Buildbox. It's not a ready template, something you can just run, but you can create that. Okay, FPS with Buildbox for mobile phone. This will be interesting. So there is a problem with trying to make FPS game with Buildbox for phone, and it's due to the input. So for the phone, the only input you have is touch. And as far as the documentations have Buildbox documentation say, there's no support actually for multi-touch, and for FPS you need actually 2 joysticks. So if you can like take turns which actions you're doing, so for instance you're moving and then you release the button and then click shoot, then you can do that. But there is basically they're fighting for the touch position and stuff like that. So it might behave a little bit weird when you release it. But we can take a look at that also. Okay, how to use a pull template, pull move mechanic to make your character jump from one platform to another. I don't know how to do that. So the pull mechanic actually, well, pull mechanic. I'm not sure which one they use. I think they use the old, some custom slingshot, but basically what you're looking for is how to use this slingshot node to create that. So I'll leave that question. Maybe we'll later on in the video we'll try doing that. Okay. Okay, back to our FPS game. So that's that. So I guess I'll just do that. Make sure that I'm not following behind on all of the questions that you guys are asking. So if you have any questions, just ask, and I'll just fit those in with while I'm building this FPS. So that, yeah. Okay, so back to our FPS game. We have a launching mechanism. So now let's quickly build out our gun, I guess, or launcher. So we have a tube here. Let's rotate it around the x-axis 9 degrees. We'll decrease it in size. .65. We'll do 4, and then we'll do the same thing in Z. 0.4. For Y, we can make it longer, so something like 3. 4. Move it in front. So, well, -2 is front. Okay. And for our cube, I guess we can make it a little bit shorter. So 0.8. And we'll stretch it a little bit. So 3. And 2. We'll move it back. Okay, something like that. So let's see how that looks. Okay. So how do you rotate? Position in 0 and 0. Move our camera. So 0 in X and Z. We can make it -2. Well, 2. Okay. Okay, so now we can decrease the size of our ball, and you have to remember to do it both in the 3D model. So 0.2, 0.2. If, by the way, if you're trying to make everything in scale, like realistic scale, so if we look at the gravity that Buildbox is using, negative 9.8, that's actually gravity in meters per second. So the gravity is actually assuming that 1 unit is 1 meter. And basically looking at that, I mean, 1 meter radius for a ball is a pretty, for a bullet is pretty large. So because of that, the sum of the, because of that, the scaling of your characters. So usually you can see that in like jumping during the jump, because of the large scale of a character, because character usually are like 2 or 3 units, which is 3 meters, and 3 meters is pretty big for I mean pretty tall for a character. And to compensate that, usually what people do is just increase the gravity to make it seem like the scaling is correct. Because if you have large scale, large objects will seem like they're moving slow, and it's just because of that alignment of the scales. So just keep in mind that the units actually based on, if you just base the units of the gravity, the units that you're looking here is in meters, and that's if you want to calculate and do that calculation. You can always do your own scaling. So based on that, you can change the gravity to whatever you want, and based on the unit that you used for gravity per second, that's the units that you will be that's what the units can be for your game. So if you want to have inch per second, you can set the gravity for inch per second, and then assume that every unit that you use in the game is actually inches. So just a quick tip for you guys if you're interested in that. So why there's a question, why did I use a Unity, why not a Unreal Engine? So the main reason is because I have a higher interest in mobile games, and as far as I know, Unreal Engine it exports pretty large files for mobile games. So I think above 300 megabytes is the minimum, and that's pretty large. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but as far as I looked into it, that's what it is. Okay, so where are we at? Okay, so change in scale. When you change scale to your 3D model, you also have to remember to change scale for your collision shape. So 0.2, since it's using the same mesh, a sphere, we can do that. Okay. So now we need to increase the move speed of our sphere. So let's set it to 20. That might be too fast. Actually, no, that's fine. Okay, I'll turn off debug. Let's scale it. Refresh. Okay. So we can also go and add a aiming a target. So change it to 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, and then move it up by, let's see, 5, 1. So 1, and actually let's use 4 and 4. 4 and 4. And then we can add a cube. We need a 3D model. Add a 3D model to make the crosshairs. And then we can decrease it to 0.1. Leave it 1.1. 0.01 I think is gonna be better. Or 0.5. Okay, now we can move it up. What was it? We moved it up by 1, so you can move this up by 1 and forward by -2. Okay, and then scale it down to 0.5, 0.4, something like that. And I think we might even make it come thinner. Okay, remove that, duplicate it, and rotate around the z-axis, I think. Yep, there we go. And then you can use another cube and then just move it down by 0.5 to make it seem like it's attached. There we go. And so from here, it's about adjusting the camera. So probably 5 degrees. No, it's still, so 0, 0, 1, 2, 3. So 2.5. Moving it closer. I can't see the balls that are being launched. Okay, so what we'll do is rotate it up a little bit. Or we can move the camera to the side. Okay, so the balls have been launched, and since I guess they're pretty launched at a slow speed compared to what they should be launched. So we can increase the speed at which they're launched. So let's try 50 or 100. Okay, that's more like it. And I guess, well, let's build a wall so we can actually see. See how it all interacts. So there we go. We have the launching mechanism, okay, and we can move our camera back to center. So as far as I know, like that's the two modes. So either you holding your launcher on the side of the screen, or you're actually aiming for more precision shots, and usually you're aiming in the center. So, but you can see that we can't see where it's flying. Okay, so that's the basic of a launcher right now. Okay, now the biggest part about the FPS is actually the camera position, okay, which we kind of got a rough, I guess we can call it a rough draft of it. And the movement is what actually, the camera movement is what actually is a more of a difficult part about in the FPS. So the best way to make that movement is not to attach the camera to our launcher itself or the gun, but attach it to a sphere. So, and I'll show that. So let's disable that. Have a sphere. So we'll just call it character, just char, I guess. And then add that in right here. And we'll make it, so we'll disable the 3D model, but to see where the sphere is positioned, we'll actually change the color to semi-transparent, so like 100 in alpha channel. And that makes it right here. So now you can see that shape of our sphere. That sphere right there. And we can scale it up. But basically the rotation of our character or of our camera will be inside of that sphere. So, and that's how it would be. So for our camera, we'll turn on the follow rotation, set it to characters. You can specify char, but right now just follow rotation to character. Okay, click play, and nothing much changed there. We also need to change the position to character. I think that'll be better. So we can. So right now you can see that our sphere is actually dynamic. So let's change that to none. Okay, and our sphere is not in the center. So 0 and 0 for X. Y we'll set it to 2. And you'll have to play around with the settings. So that's the setup. Now to add rotation, instead of rotating our launcher, we'll rotate this sphere. So inside this char asset, we will add a move rotation. So we'll just use move rotation for now. We can always switch it to something else later, but let's do that. So move, actually rotation, touch rotate. That's the one I'm looking for. So touch rotate. Let's check. Well, let's save it before. Let's check and see our so it's moving an opposite direction in the Z, and it's moving in the opposite direction in the Y. So we can switch, invert those. So click invert X, invert Y, click play, and now you can see that we rotate that way. Okay, let's go to our camera settings. So there is follow threshold, offset, follow. So as you can see that there isn't a force for rotation. So there's the follow force for position, I guess, but for rotation there is still this smooth following in rotation. And I don't know if follow rotation is actually going to affect it. It does affect it, but not in the way that we're looking for. So set it back to 1. So I'm not sure if there's a way to like change the smoothness of it, so it'd be like more, so it'd be faster than we're experiencing right now. You can always write your custom camera follow, because there is a way you can access the camera position and rotation, but we're not going to do that. So we're just going to use what's available for us right now. Okay, so we got the rotation going. Now we need to attach our launcher to rotate, and to do that you can just drop that launcher inside of the character, and now you can see that whenever we rotate the camera, the launcher is also rotated, but the spawner, as we set it up, it doesn't actually register that rotation. And I think it's due to the fact that actually the rotation of the gun does not change. It only changes the rotation of the parent, which is the character. And so we can check that. Let's go to the spawner. And in our spawner, we can see that it's checking, so that if the ignore rotation is not off, which means it's not checked, then the rotation actually is using the entity rotation. And we are not rotating the entity. We're not rotating the gun. We're rotating the parent of the gun. And you can, so I think you can solve that by using the world rotation instead of the current object or the current asset rotation, using world rotation. So let's check if that's actually the solution that we're going to do. So let's go check the API, JavaScript API, and after we check that, I'll look at the questions that you guys have. Okay, so we want to go under entity, and we're looking for rotation. So find rotation, and we have the rotation. So that's those rotations, and actually there isn't. There's a world position option, but there's not. We don't have a world rotation. Okay, so here we are running into an issue, but since we know that we want to follow the parent and we have the parent, we can use the parent's rotation instead of this entity's rotation. So there's the option here. So if we ask for parent, we'll return a parent. If the parent doesn't exist, it will return a null. And the best way of doing that is, we'll still, I guess, try null checking. What's called a null checking. And you can do an if statement saying this entity parent. So if it's null, it actually will be used as false. And so if it's false, nothing inside will be executed. So we'll just, if there's no parent, it's going to default back to the entity's rotation. If there is a parent, then we will overwrite the rotation position, so to the rotation of our parent. So this entity, then we get the parent and the parent, or the rotation of the parent. So that's a quick modification, and that should get our. So you can see that it does rotate, but we're having that issue of the move, the rotation move calculation is now kicking in the problem that we saw before. The fact that that rotation, follow rotations actually wasn't working correctly. So I'm wondering if actually we decrease the time, if that's going to change anything. So 0.5. Okay, so that's not changing anything. Okay, so create rotation. So the whole follow rotation. So the whole issue that we're having is with this part right here, the one that is calculating what direction it needs to go into. And we are rotating around x-axis and was it x? Yeah, x-axis and the y-axis. Is it y? Yes, y-axis. So we're not rotating around the z-axis. That's the only two axes that we're using. And so there's the quaternion calculation. Then it modifies the velocity based on that. This right here just gets the rotation in terms of quaternions, and then it creates a create rotation metrics. So it's using transform from point. Well, let's check what options we have for for our metrics. So it transforms the specific point by this matrix and returns the result. What's the difference between vector transform specified vector by this matrix? Transform the specified vector by this matrix, returning as fourth. So let's see if we can use the not point, so velocity, but a vector, if that's going to actually change. No, there's still the same issue. Okay, so in this case, we can fall back to using just angles instead of quaternions. I'll take a look at the quaternions a little bit later, but I don't always wanted to figure out how all the quaternions work. I did some work with them, but I don't remember off the top of my head how all of them work. So instead of quaternion, we'll just get rotation. Well, we'll get a rotation, and we'll need to modify our velocity. So we'll create a new velocity. So just new velocity, and then set it to a new vector. Vector 3. And we'll just leave it empty for now. And for our new vector, yeah, let's write them out right here. For our new velocity, we'll set x to be, so that's where our calculations are going to go, and we are looking for x. We are looking at sine, well, math dot sine, I think lowercase sine, and we're passing in the angle, which is rotate, and we're rotating around two axes. So we're rotating around y. So let's use y for x. The sine, math sine works with radians instead of angles. So you have to actually do the conversion from radians to radians. From degrees to radius. So 360 is how much degrees are there in the circle, and times by 2 pi. So 2 and pi, we can use pi. We can find pi in math.pi. That's the pi variable. And you can actually, instead of using the 360 divide by 360 multiplied by 2, you can just divide it by 180, and that just saves you writing one more step. Okay, so that will return us a, so I'm not sure if this is supposed to be cosine or sine, we'll check that, but that just returns a value from -1 to 1. And we want to multiply that value, the value that we get, by the velocity. So velocity times z. So since we're just using the z-axis to figure out which direction it's going, we're just going to use that. Let me actually check. So yeah, we're using the right one. Sine of 0 is 0, and so if we have 0 degrees rotation, then it shouldn't, the velocity in the x-axis shouldn't be set to anything. So then we want to do the same thing, but now we want to do it in a z direction, so math velocity z, and the only difference is that we want to look for cosine instead of sine. So save that. Okay, so for y we're just gonna set it to for y we'll set it to 0 for now. So this should just look at the rotation in the y direction, and based on the rotation in the y direction, it should change at which angle we are shooting. So, but it doesn't look like it's working. So we're getting the rotation. I got everything correct. Oh, okay. So then I want to set it back to velocity. So for velocities, I want to use the new velocity instead of the velocity that I had before. That's one thing that we missed. And it looks like it's probably shooting in the opposite direction. Or are we getting an error? Okay, so we are actually haven't defined new velocity outside of the if scope. So let's try this and make sure that we're not getting. Wait, what did I just do? Okay, so I'll just set back the new velocity to velocity so that we change the calculation there. So there we go. Now we have the rotation, but you can see that whenever we point it up, it actually doesn't actually change that. Okay, so we'll fix that, but before we continue, let's actually look at what you guys are writing there and some questions that you guys have. Okay, so so the questions, okay, unit would answer that, but so haptic feedback for character, please. Okay, we're actually, yeah, we can take a look at haptic feedback. There isn't a node for it, so that's why I guess most people are asking about it. The Buildbox does have support, and it's a pretty simple implementation. And okay, let's actually check that out. So if we go to a documentation, inside the documentation, the haptic feedback is actually under system. So you go in help classes and system, under system, there is this method right here, which is send haptic feedback. And you can specify the intensity, and the intensity options, if you check, let's click on that. If you check the intensity options, the only options there is 1 or 2. So meaning 1 is less intense and 2 is more intense. And as far as I've tried it on iOS and on Android. In iOS, it actually makes a difference, 1 and 2. On Android, I don't remember if one of them doesn't work at all, or it just, or it's just the same. Or maybe it was just the device, my older device, that had only one option. I'm not sure, but as far as I know, it's not working as good on Android as it is on the iPhone. So, and to use it, you just have to call the system and send haptic feedback. That's just it. So for we actually can add that for our game here. So here, if you want to add haptic feedback, just add another script, then click the add button for input. So send, click that, connect that on press, and in here where we get the signal, all you do is set the intensity. So you call system first, so let's look at in system. So system dot send haptic feedback, and you specify the intensity that you want it to send it. So send it intensity 1, and that will send the haptic feedback. So there's not much to it. If you want to have settings for turning on and turning off, you can use variables for that, but I'm not going to go and show that right now. But that's pretty much how you use a haptic feedback. As far as I know, it just buzzes just once, and that's it. If you use this, I'll need to check that. So if you want it to like pulse for a couple seconds or something like that, you can use a timer for that. So for instance, you can use a timer, click enabled, and then connect the timeout. You can specify how much times you want to for it to buzz. So number of events, like if you want to buzz it 2 times, you can specify that, and what's the interval between those 2 buzzes. So like if you want to do 1 second between, you can do just that, and that basically is gonna buzz twice. And if in our case we just want to just connect it directly. Okay, so that's haptic feedback. Okay, FPS is to rotate camera without click, just move mouse. So we can take a look at that, but that's just this change of inputs. There's, yeah, like I said, there's pretty much you can, if you set it up, you can change the movement. So right now we have the input touch rotate that changes the rotation of it. You can change that up, and so there is the mouse move option right here, and it just sends out the position of the mouse. But so to rotate it, if you want to actually rotate using the output that you get, there isn't actually a node that can do that. So you'll have to actually write your own node, or you can modify the touch rotate node to accept the mouse move. Instead of going through all of this, you can just replace the touch rotate and like disable the touch rotate. We can take a look at that a little bit later, but for now I'll just use the touch node. But yeah, so you can do that with, there is an option for mouse move, and it sends out the position of your mouse in the screen space, which I think it's 0. Actually, no, that units is 0 to 1, so that might be a little bit different here. So we can take a look at that a little bit later when we'll fine-tune the inputs. Your videos are awesome. Thanks guys for giving me feedback. How to make characters for Buildbox. So how to make characters for Buildbox, I would go with using Blender, and like any tool, you have to actually learn how to use it. But I think that's a good tool to have when making games, unless you have some other art person that can help you out. Yeah, I would go use Blender for that, creating characters. A very powerful tool, and it's open source and free, which is really nice. How much money do you make through Buildbox? Actually, I make nothing through Buildbox. So, I guess I'm just doing it for you guys. But BB3 don't have mouse rotate at the moment, and we don't know how. Okay, so again, yes, we can take a look at that later, actually how to use the mouse move to and convert attach rotate to use the input from the mouse move. How to make a pop-up window for agree or exit. Pop-up window. So the problem with that is of your implementation. So if the easiest way to make a pop-up window would use a UI screen. So in Buildbox, that's the easiest approach, is just using another UI screen. So if you're trying to exit, before you actually exit, you throw a UI screen of the confirmation UI screen, and you click a yes or no. If you want to have but the problem with that is, like, it's gonna replace the current UI screen. So if you want the UI screen to be in the background, and then another UI screen to overlay, well, not UI screen, but a pop-up to overlay that UI screen, and just have an option of agreeing, then you'll have to use assets. So for UI screen, and you'll have to use like add a default asset. And so for instance, let's add another default asset, and this one is going to be, well, actually we don't have to have two default assets. So for instance, we'll add a control button right here, and to see where it's located, let's actually use a default text and just set, like, for instance, X. So to have a pop-up, you can use a like your dialog screen. By default is visible. Set visibility. There we go. So set visibility, you can change that to be set as false. So you uncheck that. That means that it shouldn't be visible. Let's make sure we save that before. So you can't see it. And what you can do is on UI button. So on the UI button, press. Actually, we'll need another you set visibility node. So set visibility and turn that visibility on. So, and on click of our control button, which is that control button that we just had, we can turn on that visibility. So there's the dialog, and in here, so in here you would have the confirmation text. So for instance, we can add a label saying, except our label is going to be stretched now. Are you sure? And you can add another button, make it red, decrease it in size. So scale in Y, set it to something like 0.5. Move it forward. So you can see that there's a lot of tweaking that you gotta go through to make it look like you want it to look. So we make the dialog 2 into and move 1 upward. Then we'll need another label. The label is gonna say yes, I guess. And then we'll need to move the label down and move it up to 2. And I think we want to move it to 2. Well, I said down, but I typed in 1. Okay, so we'll need to change the scale back to 1, 1. Okay. So there is your window right here, but the button right here, right now. So that how you would trigger the button is by using a. Let me see. By using a isTouch node. So is touched, and then you want to trigger some event. So the event that you actually want to trigger, so this is a tricky part about, because you're trying to actually confirm an exit, and an exit can be done. Let me see. I think if the event observer has the exit, so we'll set timeout. Actually, redirect review. Actually, the timeout doesn't even have. Okay, so the only option for exit is actually, I guess, the navigation button that we have. Navigation button. Right here. And the option for exit is right here. So now, with this this setup, that's a little bit harder when you're using a UI screen and you have a dialog and then click yes. So if Buildbox actually has documentation for exit, so let's actually see exit if it's actually available here. So system, we don't have exit there. Let's check for script. Sometimes it's a bit hard to find where something would be, because some things are all over the place. Oh, actually, let's try searching for exit. Okay, so there is no API calls they can use for exit unless they named it something else. And with that, the two options that you have is either writing a script that will retrieve this object and display it. So by default, you can have it turned off or hidden. So off screen, so you can just have a navigation button that is positioned here, and then on click of the control button, you need to switch the position to where your button is, and yeah, like work it that way. And like I said, that's the more complicated route to go. The easiest route is basically you have two UI screens. Let's go. So the easiest one is to have two UI screens, and let's remove that from this one. So instead of the control button, we'll have a navigation button, and this navigation button, what actually it will do is load our confirmation window. So this is the easiest route, but you'll see that the menu was actually going to disappear. So we don't need that. And inside here, we don't even need the default. Okay, yeah, I guess we can remove that. We can just have a default font saying, "Are you sure?" something like that, and then having yes placed right here, and that will be your navigation button, which is going to exit, and you can duplicate it and have another navigation button, and that one is going to say so we'll use a default navigation for that, or you can use default, or actually you can use back since you navigated to this UI. So the back button actually go to the previous UI that you were in, which yeah, that's, I find that that's helpful, so that you don't have to create your routings, because you can only route it out in the one point. This way, if you use back, you can actually go to this confirmation window from multiple menus or whatever you have. So that's basically right here. So you click yes, that should exit, and you click no, it goes back to your menu. So yeah, unless you want to create a lot of custom code that will be looking for your navigation, moving it, this is the best route that you have in Buildbox. Guess hopefully that actually helped you out. So someone's asking about the grappling hook Buildbox. So yes, I'll share that. I was hoping to get like 200 likes, and the reason for that, I want like so that you guys would motivate me, I guess, to complete it faster. So it's what I showed in the video of the grappling hook. It's not it's a working, but there's still some things that I need to fix with that, and I'll probably have to, since I'm like it's almost 150 likes, I think, so I'll probably do it ahead of time before it's gonna get 200 likes. But I'll need to fix that, some things with it, and I'll get it out and do a tutorial how to actually use it. So yeah, be on a lookout for that. Okay, so let's actually get rid of these UI screens. We don't need them. Save our game. Okay, so that's all the questions for now. So we can go back to our FPS. Okay, so we stopped at rotation. So we got the rotation in the y-axis to work with changing the position, but you can see that when we're rotating in, what is it, the x-axis, it's actually not changing our rotation. Okay, so and to that we need to actually go back to our script, and that was the move script that we're modifying. So go back to our move script, and inside here we need to also include the rotation of the z-axis. Yes, wait, no, not the z, the x-axis for our calculations. And to include that rotation, so for y, we know that our y will be based on the sine of the z, of the x. Oh, it's getting messed up. Okay, so the rotation of x. So for rotation of x is 0, meaning that we're looking straight forward, then there is 0 velocity going up, and as soon as we start rotating up, that velocity should start increasing in the up direction. Now I think we'll have to change the sign, so it probably has to be negative. That's what, as far as I know. So set that, but that's not done yet. So click preview. Okay, so we got the Y to work. But okay, is it? Okay, that's interesting. So it's there at one point it stops shooting. Okay, for some reason when I turn back, it actually is not shooting, so let's set it to 0 and see what's going on here. So okay, so there's something going on here. Okay, so let's check our rotation vector. So for follow rotation, enable. So let's log our rotation and see what we're dealing with here. So we got 0. And here we have negative, okay, so 76, 30, negative 35. And negative 80. So it flipped it in the Z direction, and we're not looking at the Z direction. So that's the benefit of using quaternions, that you wouldn't have these issues, because rotation can be defined in different ways. So for instance, like we're just rotating in here, we're just rotating around the y-axis, right? So the only thing that should be changing is the middle, but you can see that other angles are changing as well. And the thing is, like, we're getting 3 outputs. So the first output, and has the angle that we're actually looking for, right? That's the one that should give us the right direction and everything. But the other two are already like converted directions. Okay, so there's two ways we can do that. Is so have a way that we can disable it after the first run, which actually that can be very helpful. So for our enable, let's actually disable, make sure that it only runs once. So once we set the velocity, it's not going to run again, but I hope it's going to be enough to set the velocity. So we'll set enable to false. After we set the first position, we'll set enable to false, and that will actually allow us to drop these two things. So that's working. Okay, so that actually fixes the issue. So I guess after the first time it recalculates the position rotation. So we can drop this since since I just added that that enable false here. So what it does right now, when you first create the sphere, or you spawn the sphere, it runs the update function once, and the reason why it runs once because we have this if enabled. It checks if it's enabled, and after it gets enabled, it will run. And inside of this follow rotate if statement we have here, there's the enable false. We set it to false, so that means it will not run again, and that gets rid. That just drops us from needing those two nodes that were turning off the mode node. So that's the better route, and it actually also fixes the issue with rotation being recalculated and messing up our calculations. So now our z-axis is working correctly. There is, I don't know if I want to, I'll probably leave it. There is a looks like they're not active. There is a calculation problem that still exists here, and it's the fact that whenever you rotate it up, the velocity actually increases. Well, the launch velocity increases, and it's because we're not actually we're just adding velocity in the y direction, and we're not decreasing the velocity in the z direction. So I don't know if we want to add that or not. Oh, let's just add that in. I mean, it's not that complicated. All you do is use the cosine instead of sine and multiply the other values, so that way the z and x will be decreased. And so yeah, and the y rotation does not affect our z velocity, y velocity for our launch. So now that should be the correct calculations for everything. So there you go. We have the rotation, and we can move around, shoot some obstacles. And the next one is how we get our character to move. So let's get our character to move. And again, I think would be better to have the character move inside our inside here. I don't know if I want to actually make another. Okay, we'll just make him move right now. here, and then we'll decide if we'll need to make another parent for this. So have a parent for rotation and another parent for movement. So for movement, let's actually use keyboard movement, since I am on a PC. So keyboard movement, and the outputs that we get are X and Y. So for that, we can actually use X and Y with the move nodes. Connect those, X and Y, and the keyboard movement. So actually uses, as far as I remember, you can either use the AWSD keys or the arrow keys, and they're actually written in both. And the output, let's actually show you how. So if you're not sure about any outputs that nodes give, you can always use a logger. So the logger is just a node that, I mean, well, the only thing that it has here is basically log, but you can specify it, like if you want to log it as an error, normal, or so some options, and then also log name, which just prepends to any output. So that means this logger right here is going to start with P0 colon, and then the output will be followed by that. So if you have multiple loggers, so for instance, in our case, let's use 0 for X, and let's duplicate that. And for our Y, we'll just set it to like 1. You can change it to more meaningful labels, but it's basically for you to be able to distinguish which one is the one that you're looking for. And so we click W. You can see when we're holding W down. Okay, let me clear that, because okay, so when I click W, you can see that P0 is 0 and P1 is -1. So P1 is the Y. We get a negative when we hold W, and then if we click, let's clear that again. So okay, there we go. So click W, 0, 1. So -1 in the Y direction, and then when I release it, it sends back 0, 0, which makes the move nodes stop. And if I click S, it's 0, 1. If I click Z, it's 1, 0. And if I click A, it's -1, 0. So that's a way you can actually like see what's the outputs. And again, you can always specify put more meaningful labels. For instance, if we're just looking for X, we can use X here, and if we're looking at Y, we can put Y here, and that way it's going to be a little bit clearer of what we're looking for, and we don't have to look back and forth. So there we go. So X0, Y -1, 0, 1, -1. So very useful things here. So now for our movement, for Y, we want to use the move node. So follow rotation. We want to turn that on, so we can remove the X and Y, and I guess set the speed to, let's actually double it. We can always adjust it. So here is Y. Now for X, you can use a move node, but if we use a move node in the X position, it's not really what we're looking for. So yeah, let's say 5, okay, for instance. So you can, if you want to make this kind of gameplay that when you click A, it moves to the side, and D to the other side, and then you use the camera. Actually, we forgot the rotation, because yeah, we need to turn on follow rotation on the x-axis also. And I think we're moving side faster than actually going forward. So let's fix that. So that's our movements, side to side, front and back. And since we have follow rotation on, if we rotate our camera, it actually moves with us. The issue with this setup is that if the follow rotation is up, you can actually see that we are flying, so we're actually above. So it's like, I guess what is it, God mode in Minecraft. You're flying, and that's not typically what you're looking for. You wouldn't want the y-axis to be affected by the rotation. So to fix that, I guess just a quick, there's I guess multiple ways you can fix that, but a quick way you can fix that is by using a position limiter, I guess. Let's try that. So for our position limiter, we'll set, we can remove all the limits on the Z and X, and for our Y, we'll set our position to be 0, I guess. I'm not sure where our sphere starts at. So let's go. Oh boy. There we go. I guess Buildbox crashed on me. Let's launch it back up. And see where's the last time we saved it. Okay, so we're modifying the character, and we have pretty much we got everything saved. So I'm not liking this rotation, and I have no idea. I mean, there's no options for the camera to follow force in rotation. And this follow force affects the position in it. So if we set it to 0.1 to 0.1, then it's going to affect the position. So we have this kind of a delay of our position. But the rotation wise, there is no settings for that. I mean, I probably would want it a little bit faster than it's currently at. And we can check that in the API, but for now, let's what I was going to try, a position limiter. So we're looking for position limiter, and I want to see where our initial position of the sphere is at. And the position, well, of our character, it's at Y. So we set it to 2 for initial position. So we can just use that as a limiter, as the value for limit of Y. So 2 and 2, save that, click play, and that should stop us from being able to fly up. Okay, so there we go. We have our FPS. We have our FPS player now. So most of I guess FPS have a run option, so you can like hold shift. Well, on PC you can hold shift and run, but as far as I know, Buildbox does not allow keyboard inputs shift. So let's double check that. Maybe they added support that, but okay. Camera shake, keyboard button, And if we try clicking shift, yes, so Buildbox keys modify, so we can't use Control, Shift, or Alt. So those keys are not allowed for us, which is kind of sucks, because usually it's Shift that you're using for that, and space for jump. So you can use another key. I don't know, the other keys are not really comfortable to use. So like Z, I guess, but yeah, it's not as comfortable. And the change that we're gonna do, so I don't know if we want to change. So there isn't actually a node that you can swap of what's being used, what type. So it's what we're looking for is kind of a switch, but not really, because there's this switch node. But the switch, it just triggers between which one is being used. But we want the signal to be passed through to A and B. But we can also trigger which input is going to be passed based on the trigger. So you can reuse the switch, and the only difference that we can that we need here, so we have the if name is trigger, so it's looking for the trigger, but we'll add else. So if the name is not trigger, then what we'll do is so instead of using this switch to change true or false, we need to move it into the else statement, and for here we'll pass in the value. So for switched, we'll use, so wherever it's true, we'll pass in the value, and we can remove the other one. So like that. And I guess for trigger, I think we can just drop everything and just use that. Okay, and we'll need another input, and this will be our input. So this can be the value that we're going to be receiving. So some length of this right here. So we have a move, and then another move. So the first move is going to be our 8, and our second move, we'll set it to, let's actually double it. So if we click Z in our case, it should trigger to be in a run mode. And then if we release it, it's going to trigger it again, and it's going to switch back to our slow mode. So click play, and it's not working as expected because we have true sending. So by default, we need to make sure that both of them are false, and only when we get input it actually sends the input. So there's still gonna be some issues, I feel like. Okay, see. So I guess we connected the opposite. So when I have holding down Z, it's actually moving slow, and when I release Z, it's going fast, and it's based on which state it starts at. And the state that it starts is in false, and we want to actually start in true. So you can switch that. Now, if we want to run fast, we can hold down Z. The problem that still that we still have is if we're walking and then we want to run. If I click Z, it actually like gets into a loop because we're not changing the value of the inputs. So in that case, I think we'll have to bring back our logic for our trigger. So what happens in trigger, we'll need another variable that will be a previous value. We'll start the value at 0 for our previous value, and we want to switch it. So if it's switched, that means that it needs to be the opposite value. So previous value for, well, actually no, it's the same. So previous value, except for, okay. So for A, we actually want to set it to 0 here. And for B, we want to set 0 here. I think that's the setup. Let's try that out. Actually, I guess I messed it up. Okay, I'm not setting the previous value. So 0 looks like it's, well, actually, I can't tell yet. So the previous value needs to be set here. So inside here, we set the value to previous value. Like that. Make sure that we actually save that value. And then whenever it gets triggered, we can use that value that was stored to, there we go. Now we have it. So if I'm running, if I'm walking and I click Z, it's gonna start running. So that's another cool node that I guess you can quickly set up, and you can use it. Basically, you can use that to trigger which output receives the input values. So if you actually want to pass through values and you want to switch which one, using a switch, that's the way you can set it up. Okay, so let me take a quick look at what you guys are saying in the comments. Okay, how to add GDPR in Buildbox. So GDPR. As far as I know, there's no options for GDPR actually in the Buildbox engine. Well, you export it when you export it, so I am not even sure where to look for. I guess the most options are here. Let's check the API for that. Our API. So when you add advertisements to your game, the GDPR actually gets added automatically. And yeah, there's nothing in the documentations about GDPR. So the GDPR gets added automatically, and you have the default text that says that. If you want to modify it, so for instance for Android, if you want to modify it, you can modify it on the Android side and change how it looks, the text that it displays, and all of that stuff. But yes, there isn't an easy way to do it in the Buildbox engine itself. So here is a exported project for Android Studio. Just open it up here, and in Java, so there is under com, I guess, Buildbox player, or Okay, so under consent, I think this is the one. So here is the logic for the GDPR logic, and you can look through it. The text that is displayed there, as far as I remember, is in the resources. So in resources, under strings, you can find it right here. So consent dialog explanation, and you have right here the text that you would see. Do you consent sharing the personal information? Blah 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 blah. All of that stuff is written out here. So if you want to change the text, you can do that. Then also this is the text for the buttons. So not at all or yes to all. That's the two buttons, and then the consent target advertisement title. I think that's the consent to target advertisement and analytics. So that's the title of it. And show more details. So privacy policy and view privacy policy. So these are some of the variables that you can change. So if you want to change the text, you would change it here. The styling, I think it's under layout. And so here's the consent styling. If you want to change the styling of the consent, so here's exactly how it looks. So that's the text, the title, your buttons, and show more details for privacy policy. And yeah, if you want to change, so consent item, this is I guess this is the privacy policy for Iron Source. And what is this for consent details? Let's see. Okay, so I guess this is more a list of all of the consents or targets. So, but this is the screen that is basically displayed, and if you want to modify it, you can just you'll have to do it in here. You can replace it with your a background image. What's it made out of? So there's an image right now right here. This is an image, so you can change that. Then the text fields, so the title, then the description, then also you have the button, and just use a background color, and the other one is transparent. It's not even a button, it's just text that has a touch listener, and privacy policy. So this is where I would change it if I want to change the GDPR. So, but there isn't a way to do it in Buildbox. So hopefully that is helpful. And I think it would be the same in iOS. If you're doing iOS, it would be the same, except it's going to use the iOS Xcode for changing that. Okay, so what else we have? In the road template, the template allows half of the main character to go off the beaten path. Then in some way that can be corrected so that doesn't enter the character state. I'm not really clear. Not really clear on this question. So there's some way, okay, there is some way that this can be corrected so that does the entire character stay in the way. So I'm thinking the road, which one is the template? So I guess the twisted road is that. I think you're talking about the twisted road. So yeah, we can take a look at that in a little bit. Okay, make sure I'm saved. Let's launch. Are you talking about the twisted road? If you're still here. Okay, so the twisted road template. Let's scale it down. So yeah, I see. So if you, okay, so does this stay this way? So that does that entire character stay in the way? Okay, so you're looking for it to not go off that like that. So the path move node is what's being used here. The limitations of so sensitivity, height over path, starting position, speed, and jump force. I guess it's not in there. So to change that, I guess you would need to change right here. So to the path width, path position 2 times starting position. And let's see if they're using 2 anywhere else. Okay. Okay, so yeah, I guess you can change this right here. So if you change to 0.8, I think that should be good. A little bit lower than that. So 0.8 is still on the side. So let's try 0.5. So there we go. So if you want to, you can change that value. So you can try 0.6, might be even closer to the edge. But this is the value they're looking for the path width and path size. Where is this? Times path size x. So this is the value that the multiplier that you want to change. So there isn't an attribute for that. In fact, if we check the path move, the new path move node, position, initial offset. Yeah, okay, that it doesn't have that option either. So you need to change that multiplier. So this 2. So in the new one, you can change this 2 to whatever you want. So 0.8 or something like that. So hopefully I think that's what you're looking for. Okay, so next question we have, hello sir, Unity. So yeah, if you have any if you have any questions in Unity, I can try answering those. I was a little bit busy moving right now, and I didn't do much with Unity, so I'll start that up soon. Hello, how can I set the position of a linker in the glue node using the set position function? I'm trying to learn JS, but I'm not able to figure out how to do it. Okay, so the glue node. I think we'll go back to our FPS template. So for the glue node, let's go. Let's actually add another. Let's use a cone and a sphere. Okay, I guess I'm not going to show the demonstration about it. Let's just go in glue node. So glue node has the linker. So it creates a linker and then set type and use the fixed linker. So the fixed linker does not really affect which position you are, what's the position of the linker itself. If it's fixed, that means the distance between those linkers is just gonna be like that. If you changed it to something else, so for instance a hinge or a point, so let me demonstrate it with a point. So you can find the linker documentation under linker, and the position, so there's the set position value here. It only affects if the type is hinge or the type is point. So if you switch it to k point, so set type to k point, then you can use this the set position and pass in the value. So the value is a vector 3. So you can say a new vector 3 and pass in the value, so 0.0.0. So no matter where it hits, it's still going to be there in L set position. So that's how you would set the position of the linker. Now actually let me try to demonstrate this. It takes a little bit of time to set it up, and I think the glue node's supposed to be on the sphere. Okay. If collide, you need an if collide node, and then on collision you want to use glue node. So, and it's important that you have the component if collide and it's named if collide, because the component name is hard-coded if collide. And I've seen one issue, when you have multiple if collides, it does not know which one to choose. So sometimes it will work, sometimes it will be very unstable. So make sure if you use the glue node that you rename other collision nodes to something. So either like numbering them so that you have only one if collide, or the other option, you can go in the script and specify like, okay, I actually want to use node 1, and then you can name your if collider to like 1, so that will be specific. So that's just a side note there. Make sure that's how it's set up. Now let's check the collision shape and make sure it's not a cube, a sphere. Okay, so now we want to make sure that both of them, let's set cone to be static and the sphere will be our dynamic. And once it collides, you can see that it's kind of glued, but it's glued to 0, 0 position. And to demonstrate that more clearly, we can position it up in the air, do it like that. So, and since 0, 0 is actually in the back right here where our camera is, actually there's lots of errors. Glue. Error on of argument is new. Okay, another glue node there. So that's what caused an issue. So you can see that it's doing that. And to change the position of it, so we can scale it up to 2. To change the position of the glue node, well, to show the position, let's actually put it up higher. So instead of 0, let's set it to 5. So it'd be like heading, and that changes the linker position. Sometimes the errors that you get are not helpful at all. Like for instance, this error right here, the asset sphere component glue line 0, error 1 argument is null, and that's not helpful at all, because if you look at the line 1, there's absolutely nothing there. In fact, doesn't it say line 0? Yeah, it says line 0, which, well, there is no line 0. So one of those things are actually thrown an error, and I think it's this it's the fact that we're colliding with the ground. So to change that, we need to switch the affected asset to collide only with a cone. I think that's actually no, still causing issues. So there we have some, we're using the right sphere, right? Yeah. There is basically, that's how you set the position. I'm not sure what you're trying to create that, use it for, but yeah, that's pretty much it. And you can use based on the position of the entity that you collide with to make that glue node work. Okay. What else? Can you please show how to make a haptic feedback node for defeat? So I already showed that. So the haptic feedback node. So try looking back. I guess you left or something like that. But I did show how to make a haptic feedback node. And it doesn't really change if you're using defeat or something else. Thank you. Good sir. The linker seems to load at 0, position by default when I change to K point regardless of the object location, and I want to change to specific position. So yeah, you just let me check a glue node again. So yeah, the position of it, that's all you do is set position and pass in the value. So, and the value is a vector 3. So if you follow those steps, then basically that's how it should work. So L.set position, you pass in the value. One thing you might want to do it, so one thing you might to do it after let's see if it actually says anything about that. Set position linker. Let's start function script and call inch fixed. Set position of the linker. So it says nothing specific about it, but yeah, that, I mean, that's pretty much it. You just pass in the vector3, a new vector3 value, and you specify positions. So 1, 1, 3, and that should link it, but it links it into the world position. So the linker, it's not created as a child, so it's in the world space. So 1, 2, 3, that's gonna be in the world. If you want to use it relative to relative to this entity or the collided entity, you can use that. So the int, let's see, so the int will be this entity, and then the call int will be the entity that you collide with, so the sensor collision entity. So the in my case, it will be the call int would be the cone that I collide with, and you can use that value. So if you want to create a linker at the collision entity, you would use that position basically. And that will set the linker to the center of the collision shape, the collision. The collided entity. So that's basically. Okay, so can you please show to make a haptic feedback? Okay, defeat. Okay, hello, I have a few questions. Would you show how we make a limit to draw template? Limit can draw template. I don't want to use the user to be able to draw with no limits. Can you show how can we set the timer? I think, okay, the draw limit, I'm stuck with another problem. Apparently, if you could address one well. So I have 3D runner game that has constant speed, but I want to add a boss middle game. I'll take a break right now. I need to check something, and then I'll be back in a short time. So back to the questions. By the way, if you want to see anything else for me to add into the FPS game, you can write that in the description, in the chat. Okay, so hello, a few questions. Would you show how we can limit the draw template? What type of limit are we talking about? I don't want the user to be able to draw with no limitations. Can you show me, show how? Can we set a timer or X and Y for its max? So the draw template, let me remove this and save. And let's go back. Let's go back to our templates, and the draw template is draw template. Where is it? There is our draw template. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is the draw template we have. And currently, there are no limitations. Okay, so for looking at what's going on here, you have it's probably a custom node, which is master probably. So let's see what's the setup on it. Okay, so inside our init set path, I have not looked at this template at all. Well, this node, how they have the draw. So I'm gonna have to take a look at this and see what's going on. So it uses path. And on each update, so let's see, point length is in 0, index lerp 0.0, 0.1 move, set position X, position Z, and previous. So where are the path? So the path is being created Is there another one? Okay, so this is where it's draw. So the draw node uses the touch. So there's our logic, and then so touch move, what it does, it I think should use the path. So here we have the path, gets the master. Where does it? Okay, so it connects on start. It gets the master component, which is referred to master now, and inside here on touch begin, no, touch move. So on touch move, it basically adds all the points that the touch mode gets. So it adds it into an array of path points, and then in the master it actually follows those points. So if you want to add limitations in X and Y, so there is world points right here. Marker set position world points, and they're converted. So the world points get converted right here. So it gets the screen to world, and then cursor set position, and it gets converted right here. If you want to change, limit the X and Y, so you can use the world position, and the limitations that you want, you can just use add them here. So for instance, if you want to limit the x-axis, math dot min, so what's the minimum value that you want? Well, actually, no, what's the maximum value you want? So if you want the x to be maximum of, for instance, 100, you can say that 100. Anything above 100 is going to be actually still in 100. And if you want to add the minimum value for it, you can use math and dot min. No, actually, min, it's the opposite. And then you can specify, so for the min, you would specify the for the max. Messed that up. Okay, so in here, the 100 is the maximum value, and use math min to specify the maximum, because it chooses which is the smaller value. So if your input, world input, is over 200, it's gonna actually fall back to 100. And for max, you specify your minimum value, so you can put in like 0. You probably want negative something, but we'll put it in 0 and show how that's gonna change in the gameplay. So now if we go here, if we draw the line, you can see that we can't go past that, so we can go in that direction, but here we're limited on this x0 position. So that's how you use position of x. The timer, so what's the other question of using a, can we set a timer or x and y for max? So the timer, you don't even have to do anything in here. Well, unless you want to disable, so for instance, you give them 10 seconds to draw and then the character actually follows, then yeah, you want to actually change the input. And here you would change it inside. So is there signal input? There is a signal input and value. I'm not sure if it's used by anything. We'll just leave it that. So you can use have stop, I guess, input, and inside here you can check else if, well, no, we want to check. We want to check if name, so that the name of the input that we're looking for is stop. So it is stop. Then we can create a variable called stop, set to false by default, and in here we set stop to true. You can set it up using a enable logic, but I'll just do stop here, and then we can use else. Make sure that the second logic, if it ever gets triggered, be triggered only in a different way. Okay, so inside here, then we want to use the stop, and where we want to add that is in here. So if not, stop. So stop, touch, stop. So if it's not stop, that means if we're still running, then it's gonna run this logic, and we can actually add that to our check here. So if it's not master or not stop, well actually no, if it's stop, we want to return, ignore the touch end, and then for touch begin, we can also do a if check here. So if stop, then we can just return. So that's basically, that will allow you to use a timer or a delay. So we can use a delay. Let's see that. So on start, we connect it to our draw delay. So give like 2 seconds to draw. Click play. So now we have 2 seconds to draw, and after that we can no longer draw, and we can't start to draw. Okay, that's the limitations. And so timer limit or X and Y limits for the draw template. I'm stuck with another problem. I'm appreciate if you could address this one as well. So I have a 3D runner game that has constant speed, but I want to add a boss in the middle of the game. How can I set the moving speed to 0 and reset it again when the character leaves the area or completes the task? So a runner game. So you just want to turn off the move node, and you can use false. What triggers that? You can create an invisible. So let's see if we can use something. Something simple. So all of these use path move, right? Let's see. Actually, let's check this one. Okay, so for this one, our character has a move node right here. So if you want in your game, for instance, in our level 1, where is the start? So that's the end, that's the start. So in our level 1, if we want our character to, for instance, stop moving, set a cube, put it here somewhere. So you can just use like a trigger. So we'll disable this no collision. Well, actually, we need collision. So we'll set it to static, actually. Set it to static, but for affected assets, we'll set it to none, so that the character won't actually collide with it. The trigger, the if collide, will be triggered by this, but the physics won't be actually colliding with our character. So in our character, we can add a if collide, and so we can connect that affected asset. We can specify that the affected asset is cube, and on if collide, it's gonna send us a true value, and we want to actually use the invert of true. So signal invert, convert it to false, and then trigger that. So for some tasks, for instance, if you want to defeat a boss or something like that, you would want to use a send node and a receive node. So inside here you have a receive node, and once the boss gets defeated, before you trigger the defeat node, you send a signal, and you receive it here and reset the movement back to true. So how that's gonna look like when you stop. So you go here, you collide, and it stops. And it looks like it actually collided and stopped, but let's actually, instead of using a receive node, we'll use a keyboard button. So for instance, we'll enable it back on. So for a keyboard button, we need to make sure we have a signal filter, because it as soon as we'll let it go, it's going to send a false signal, which is going to stop. So signal filter, make sure we only listen to true from our keyboard, and let's use space. So if we hit space, it should continue the game. Click play. Wait, to jump, I have to tap, okay. So it stops, we hit space, and it doesn't do anything. Okay, so the reason why it's not doing, because it's still in the collision. So it starts and stops again. For us, what we want to do is have a listener here too. So if something collides with our cube, we want to remove the cube. Because we never leave the collision. Okay, well, not something we need specifically a character, because it just collided with platform and just removed itself. So there you go. That still doesn't work, and that the reason behind that one is because once we remove, I think the if collide sends a false signal which turns back the movement on. So we'll use a signal filter. So yes, there's a lot of steps that are involved to get it to work. So there we go. So you can see that is the movement stopped right now, and if we hit space, it should continue running, but it doesn't. Interesting. Whoops, now we crashed it. Okay, so that's the setup that you would use. I think the last time I clicked Z, it did continue. I just was clicking once it was colliding. That's the setup that I would use. Let's launch Buildbox. Okay, thanks again. It was very helpful. Okay, what's the difference between Buildbox and Unity? Buildbox is mainly targeting towards no code game development, and their main the games that mainly are the simplest to create with it is hyper casual. So something that basically runs infinitely. You can also make levels, but the hyper casual games are mainly the games that you would create, and it's for mobile games. Unity, on the other hand, it's more code based. There are no code packages that you can use, Bolt and stuff like that, and you can create serious PC games with it. You have more visual control, so you can actually make some make shaders with graphics cards capabilities. We don't really have that support in Buildbox. So if you're looking for a very serious game and you want a lot of control of how the game is rendered and what shaders used and efficiency and stuff like that, you would use Unity. And another one is like Unreal, also not dots, Godot, I think. Is that how they pronounce it? Godot. I'm not sure what's the right pronunciation, but those other engines, they have more control and more things that you can do there. I am making a if you haven't seen, I'm making some Unity nodes or system of some sort. It's not a drag system, just checking it out and like seeing what I can do there. Let's see. And there is a tutorial of me doing that. So much for answering my question. Can you also show how can we create a custom collision group, like a group for ammo and weapons? So there isn't a ability for creating custom collision groups in Buildbox. You can just use the existing ones. So the character, enemies, and platform and coins. So that's the only collision groups that we have right now. And I think at the last live stream, Buildbox mentioned about something about adding collision groups, more options for collision groups, which would be really handy. Yeah, because once you start adding more variations of things, that creates problems. Because yeah, you can't. If you use different ammo, then you'll have to basically use a ton of if collides to make sure that every ammo does something. So yeah, the only collision groups that we have here are these 4. And how I would use them is basically what's the most needed. If like, don't worry about the names that they have, character name or enemy or platform coin. As far as I know, there is nothing that is using them unless you specify to use those. So you can freely use those collision groups for like whatever. You can use character for a weapon or ammo. It doesn't really matter. So the project that I'm doing right now, well, it's a tutorial, is this right here, and it's made in Unity. So this is like a puzzle game that I'm trying to make. So that's current state of it, and I'll be getting back into it probably this week and create a new tutorial about it. So if you're interested in like learning Unity on top of Buildbox, I mean, it's pretty nice. You can start learning it now in case you ever need it. So since I did most tutorials on Buildbox, I'm kind of keeping that in mind, that most of my viewers are actually coming from Buildbox, because that's where all my I assume that's most of my subscribers are from there. So that's my assumption, and I keep that in back of my mind when I'm doing the tutorials, that I'm going towards showing you guys how to use Unity based on the knowledge that you have with Buildbox. There are, if you're just looking to start Unity, there's great tutorials by Bracky's channel. He has lots of Unity tutorials, and they're pretty in detailed, and there's beginner ones and more advanced, so take a look at that. If you're looking for something specifically, you can write to me, and I guess I'll see what I can do with making a tutorial for that. So that's the Unity project, and well, that's the tutorial that I'm making. And also there is another project that I'm doing. So that actually, let me show you some capabilities of Unity, which are pretty cool. Thank you. How can we remove a UI label? I want to have a countdown at the beginning of the game as the effect, and I want to remove the label after the start finishing the countdown. So there's different ways you can create that countdown. You can either use either use the default label, and you can place it inside here, and then here you can have a timer. Well, actually you don't even need a timer. You can use a delay, I guess. Delays, multiple delays. So, and you can connect your delays, whatever they are. So for instance, you have a delay of 3 seconds, a delay of 2 seconds, and a delay of 1 second. And then with that, I would use a state machine. So you need 4 states. So state 1 will display your first label. So that's I guess that's the easy way that I can think of right now. So you can do that, and then at the end, instead of showing a label, you can just remove it. Or if you want to show 0, you can add another state. So after you wait 3 seconds, you want to remove it. After you wait 2 seconds, you want to display your third label, and after 1 second, you want to display your second label. So first label would be 3, 2, and then 1, and then you remove it. So like that, and we can remove the animation node since we're not looking for it. There is our UI, and here's your countdown: 1, 3, 1, 0, and it removes. So that's one approach of taking. If you want to remove it in the UI, then yeah, you'll have to write custom code for that to find the specific label and then remove it and stuff like that. But that's the easiest way to create a countdown and remove it. So here is what I'm talking about. So the fireworks that you see right here. Okay, what's going on? You have to click play. So the fireworks right here that you see are made, or do you see them? Okay, I guess there's fog. So this is all made in Unity, and this actually I use no code to create this. This is graph nodes that create this effect. And the cool part about, I mean, count it. I don't think you can even count how much images or particles that are used here. There's a ton of them, and it's working fine, and there's no slowdown. And the reason behind that is because it's using a GPU actually to create this effect, and that's the possibilities that that Unity creates, is that the ability of creating these kind of effects and Buildbox does not have that support yet. So if that's the thing, like if you're reaching the limit of Buildbox, the capabilities of Buildbox, and you want to continue, currently you'll have to start learning another engine. And like I said, there's 3 engines. There's more than 3, but I guess the most popular ones are like Unity, Unreal Engine, and Godot or something like that. And here's the nodes that actually are responsible for that. So right there. Here are the nodes, and yeah, you connect them in a similar way as you do in Buildbox, except you have options. The nodes themselves have the options, not just only the connections. So pretty cool stuff. Okay, so looks like I'm not getting any more questions, so I'll be ending this live stream. So probably the next live stream I'll do about code. So the next live stream I'll probably do code. And so if you're looking to start, and if you're looking to start learning JavaScript, APIs, and focused just on Buildbox, what's available in Buildbox, and expand those nodes, that's what I'm going to be covering in the next one. I want your opinion on a weapon system. Should I have one object and just change the 3D model, or should I use different guns as a separate object and spawn them? So it depends what you're trying to do. So if you are changing the behavior of the guns, so like that the speed that that the bullets are spawning at, or which bullets you're using, the power or stuff like that, if you're modifying, I would go as using different assets for it, because that way it's cleaner code. I mean, not code, but your nodes are gonna be a little bit more organized, and you know specifically which nodes affect this gun, instead of like having 100 nodes and 20 of each, like for each gun you have 20 nodes and you have 5 guns, and if you need another one, you have to recreate all of those nodes. But if you're using assets, you just created one gun, and then you can duplicate that the gun that is closest to the one that you're trying to add. You change the model, you change the specs of what the speed or what bullet it spawns, and it's just, in my opinion, that would be an easier route to go. Now, if you're just changing the look of it and it does not change the performance, the behavior of the bullets or anything of that, then yeah, it would be easier just to swap the 3D model, and that should be good. I noticed that, well, at least in the editor, if you have too much 3D models in one asset, then Buildbox tends to start lagging. So that might be an issue, but I did some tests and to see if it actually affects that same effect is inside the game, and I think there is, but it's barely noticeable. So I think it's safe to just use that. So that's just okay. So I guess so the gun, this is how the gun works. So you can walk around and you can just shoot the bullets. And yeah, you can add health and stuff like that. The setup for the gun, yeah, there's two parts. Let's hope it's not gonna crash. So there's two parts. That this is, well, the script is just actually the haptic feedback that I showed how to add. But here is the spawner, and we had to actually. Wait, did we modify the spawner? I already forgot. Yes, we modified our spawner to use the parent rotation because we put the gun inside a sphere. So the gun is using a parent rotation so that it can rotate the spawned object. And the second part about the gun is the actual sphere or the bullet that gets shot. And the only thing it has is a move node, but we had to modify the move node because the matrix rotation, follow rotation script that is in this move node is actually not working correctly. And so we swapped that out with just using angles. I'll take a look at them at using quaternions to do the same thing, but I'll just do that outside of the video. Still not really comfortable using quaternions, but they're really powerful to know how to use. So that's the two parts, and the movement of the camera is inside the character, and we have the keyboard movement, which is move, and then also have the ability of running, which uses Z if you want to run, and it just uses modified switch. So if you want to see how the switch, this modified switch is created, showed it in this live stream, and it just switches between which move it uses, the 8 speed or 16 speed. And you can use this duplicate this switch and use it also for the move in the right and left. Then we have a touch rotate for rotating our camera, and a position limiter to limit our position from moving in a Y direction. Now, because I use this position limiter in this node, it disables the ability of the game to have any movement in the Y direction. And I'm not gonna go in details how to avoid this problem in this live stream, but that's an issue. So with this position limiter, you're limiting, you can't jump, the character won't be able to jump, and he won't be able to climb a ladder or do all that stuff. So it's just, if you want to add those abilities, you need to use something else beside position limiter to affect these move nodes. So and you can do that again, you can do that by changing the follow script. So inside the follow script, you can modify to ignore the y axis rotation. Is it y axis? No, that's actually x-axis. So to ignore the x-axis so that the rotation of the x-axis won't affect the position or y. Or the other, I just thought about another way you could do it, is just not wherever the position of y is being changed, you can just disable that. So instead of so we wouldn't overwrite the y position. Actually, no, I can't do that. But yeah, basically, instead of modifying the position of our new position, you use the old position. Let's actually try that out. That's a pretty fast change. But yeah, you need to modify the code. And since we don't have physics, this is the code that's being used. So let's remove that and see if that's actually gonna work. So yeah, that works. But but again, so our character, this character is, there's no physics in it. If we set to dynamic, there's a whole bunch of other issues they're gonna start coming up with that. And yeah, I'm not really a fan of how the dynamic mode affects the move node and the rotation. So like what's going on there, I like, yeah, not really easy to set up. Hopefully they will rework that, because yeah, like whenever I need to use dynamic and with a new mode, a move node or rotate node, I just avoid all of yeah, all of those nodes. Are better off create my own. So that's basically what we've created in this live stream with FPS. If you missed any of that, you can just go back and watch through some parts, just skim through what you're interested in. But that's basically all of the steps that we covered in this live stream. So any more questions? Okay, nice. Does the Buildbox support raycasting? What is that? Touch is touched. So if you take a look at the is touch node, there is two modes: AABB mode or the raycast. And yes, the raycast is supported, and you can see it right here. So based on, so if you have a raycast mode on, it the logic that is behind here is it uses the camera, gets the camera, and then screen ray from the point that was touched, and it sends out a ray from there. So that's the old ray casting that support that Buildbox has. I don't think it gets absorbed by anything. So you'll have to do that on your own. Okay, what else? Thank you so much for answering. If you have time, is it possible to have a slow motion effect in Buildbox? I use a camera animation with delay and a scene speed. Is there any better option? Camera animation delay and a scene speed. So there is a time wrap in physics, but looks like it's uses anything, actually 0.8, 0.5, 0.2. But you can see that it doesn't affect, so it only affects the physics calculations. So you can see that our bullets are like in slow motion and the boxes fly in some slow motion. But since we're not using physics for our character movement, you can see that the character is just moving in real time. So that's the slow motion support. If your entire game is physics based, then yeah, you can just use the time wrap option right here, and you can, I think you can access it through the API and modify that option. It's under physics world, except where the physics world is. So under scene, physics world, array test, time rep. So there is right here, here's the option set time rep. So you can just use that option and set your time rep. As far as I know, there's also a node for time rep. Set time rep. Yeah, okay, so and actually uses this exactly the same same API calls, and you can specify which values here. So that's an option, one option of doing it. Okay. Also, can you share the FPS game file, please? Thanks a lot. Yes. So the FPS game file, I'll post it on my Discord under resources. So it will be there. You can deactivate the rotation of dynamic character. So yeah, you can deactivate. Well, you can trick it into assuming that there's no physics, but so there's, as far as I know, there's problems with that. Basically, when you're jumping or doing all those movements, if you trick the move node to assume that there is no physics, or the rotation that there's no physics, then there are two calculations that are happening at the same time, and I'm not sure if you want to do that. I did disable. I did for some things I did do that. I tricked the system to think that there's no physics, so it just used the non-physics calculations. But yeah, there's always the problem of conflicting, because there's two parameters. There's the physics location parameter, and then there's also the world position parameters, and you're not guaranteed which one is going to actually be ran first, and you might run into some glitches with using that. But if you're careful and you just there's only one place where you modify, like for instance the rotation, instead of using the for physics touch rotate, instead of using the angular velocity, you can just use the rotation, and I think that will be fine, because angular velocity kind of messes a lot of things up, and I probably prefer using the physics non-physics rotation for rotation. But for move node, it's a whole different story how the move node works, because the move node also always sets the speed over again, so yeah, stuff like that. And the other problem with the new move node is, for instance, I'm using the keyboard move here, and when you're using physics, the move node actually ignores where is it? So the move node does not have the direction. Actually, no, they changed it. Now they included directions now. Direction. Okay, so yeah, the direction ability is added to that. But as far as I know, the problem with the move node is when you release the button, the velocity is still set. It never gets set to 0, because when you release the button, the update function just stops. So unless you have real high physics, it's gonna stop. We'll have to stop it, or you'll have to use another move node to set everything to 0. So there's different ways of doing it. But if you want to add jump capabilities in your game, then you have to use the dynamic for your character, and yeah, we'll have to work around all those issues and create a best feeling game, best feeling controls that for it. Hi, I want to know about how to have a different music in the game at the Buildbox main menu. So in the main menu, so I'm assuming that you're looking for the UI screen option for music. Okay, so the only option that we have for that is to check what option, so there's no way you can do it in the inside of Buildbox without code, but with code. So stop, play, find, create, camera. That's the only UI commands that we have. Yeah, basically that's it. There's no way you can actually access the music unless there's some hidden music stuff. Helper classes, system. So yes, there seems like there's no API for controlling music at all. The only music that you can so if you really want to control your music, I would just use the sound node instead of the background UI nodes. And the benefit actually is sound node, it actually has the volume control, and you can use the volume control, and it's pretty important. Otherwise, you're gonna have to modify your volume of your music outside in some in audio editing software, and then export it back with lower volume. But you can use the sound node to create your own music. The only problem with that is the fact that that you'll have to control your own like mute for music background. Buildbox has the two options of muting the sound and muting the background music. So if you use the sound node, it's actually going to be treated as a sound, So if you mute sound, it's going to mute your music too. So you'll just have to create your own muting management of what's considered sound and what's considered music. So that's the only downside of using this approach. Yeah, I'm not sure they're gonna touch that at any point soon. So your best bet is just using the sound for now. They have a lot of things that they need to improve, and yeah, as far as I know, their team is pretty small, and they are growing it, but I don't know. Okay, so I think that will be it for this live stream. Oh, actually, I was gonna show you the Unity nodes. So this is the project that I was just trying to create nodes, and it was one of I think devlogs that I was doing, and this game right here. Where is the game? So get ready. Here's the countdown tab. So it's just a tappy type game. So you have your points, coins, so stuff like that, and all of this right here. I actually created like nodes or scripts that you can use. So this type of a gameplay you can create using these nodes. And to quickly demonstrate, for instance, the player. how it actually looks in Unity with, using those. So inside my, where did I put the player? Plane. Okay, so here's my player plane. So by default the plane is disabled, so you can't see it. And in here's the use of those nodes. So here's the move script, which is like similar to move node, and you have the ability of setting the velocity, so in the X direction, and then also have an option for acceleration. So to do that, like you just add a movement node, select the plane, and you can add like a movement node here, and specify your speed. So if you want anything else, any other object that to create to have that move ability, you can just do that. In fact, you can, let's actually show that. So like for instance, we create a 3D cube. Here's a cube, and we want to add movement to it. Just add that in, movement, and we can say, okay, move it 2 and 1, or 1. Yeah, there we go. 3 and 1, 2 and 1. Okay. And now we can click play. And our cube just disappeared. Because what did I do? Okay, I had that issue with, I think it has to do with the materials or something like that. Let me try actually using a sprite instead, because this is a 2D game and I'm trying to. So let's use a square. There we go. So for nodes, movements, select a square, and let's try that. So 3 and 1. Y, right? I need to change Y. So there is our cube, and it's moving up. So basically that's just how you could create using that. And then you have different options here. So events, for instance, the if collide event, and how that would work, for instance, for a square. Well, let's actually demonstrate a delay. So let's add a delay. And if we want to remove this this object in certain time, we can go to game logic, I think. No, not the game logic, state. So inside our the categories, I'm not still clear on how to name them, but so use the remove, add here, and then what we want to do is create that connection, except it's not really a connection. So basically after the delay, what we want to do, so we want to actually use the remove, and we want to trigger the remove now, so that this object will remove. So set it to delay of 3, click play, and now after 3 seconds that cube should be removed. 3 seconds and the cube is not okay, so I forgot to turn on run and start. So yeah, so you either can trigger by some other event this delay, or if you want to run and start, meaning that it should be connected to start like we did in Buildbox. So it runs and start, and under the 3 seconds it just gets removed. So that's the basically the approach that I was looking for. So if you guys are interested, I can do more actually a tutorial of how to use those nodes. I did publish those nodes on itch.io. It's and you can try it out. Try those nodes out, and the project that I just showed also is on there. Okay, so I guess that's it for this live streams. Thank you for everyone for joining, and we'll see you in the next live stream, and Goodbye.